Power doesn't vanish, transforms. And sometimes, a republic dies, not with a bang, but with applause. The Roman Republic, one of the most admired and emulated systems of governance in world history, fell not to foreign invaders, but to its own contradictions, corruption, and ambition. This is the story of how the world's first major republic fell to a man who promised salvation, Julius Caesar, and how democracy gave way to empire. Rome's earliest leaders were kings, and their removal in 509 BCE was seen as a triumph of liberty. In their place, a republic was formed, guided by elected officials, balanced powers, and a Senate composed of Rome's most respected citizens. The concept of shared authority became the backbone of Roman political thought. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was revolutionary for its time. Power was divided among consuls who ruled jointly, serving only for 1 year. This prevented monarchy and discouraged long-term dominance. The Senate advised them, drawing power from tradition, wealth, and prestige. Meanwhile, assemblies gave the people a voice, though a limited one. Roman society was rigidly hierarchical, with patricians dominating the plebeians in almost every arena. Despite its flaws, the Republic allowed for civic engagement, legal innovation, and the slow expansion of citizen rights. Over the centuries, Rome grew from a modest city-state to a dominant regional power. Its model of governance became a source of pride and, eventually, of hubris. As Rome expanded, conquering Italy and beyond, wealth flooded into the city. But it did not flow evenly. The rich became richer through war spoils and slave labor, while the poor, especially small farmers, lost land and influence. The Senate, composed largely of aristocrats, resisted reforms that would threaten their privilege. The Republic's institutions weren't built for empire. Senators often used their offices to enrich themselves, exploiting provinces and manipulating elections. Bribery, vote buying, and legislative obstruction became common. The ideals of the early republic began to rot beneath the surface. Meanwhile, urban Rome swelled with discontent. Thousands of landless citizens depended on grain handouts and lived in squalor. The people grew desperate. They needed champions, figures who would bypass the Senate and promise them justice. The Republic's greatest weakness had been exposed: its inability to adapt to social and economic transformation. In the late 2nd century BCE, two brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus tried to heal the Republic's divisions. As tribunes of the plebs, they pushed for land reforms that would redistribute public land to the poor. Their cause electrified the masses, but horrified the Senate. To the elite, the Gracchi weren't reformers, they were revolutionaries. Tiberius was clubbed to death by senators on the Capitoline Hill. A decade later, Gaius met a similar fate. With them died the illusion that political reform could happen without bloodshed. Violence had entered the political arena and it would never leave. From this point on, Roman politics became a dangerous game. Populist leaders rose by mobilizing angry crowds, while conservative senators responded with intimidation and assassinations. The balance of the Republic had tipped. Ideals had given way to survival. In the early 1st century BCE, Rome faced threats abroad and unrest at home. Into this chaos stepped Gaius Marius, a general who reformed the Roman military. He opened the legions to the poor and promised land in return for service. Soldiers began swearing loyalty not to Rome, but to their commander. A dangerous shift. Marius' political rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, took this one step further. In 88 BCE, when denied command of a war, Sulla marched his army on Roman unthinkable act. He seized the city, killed his enemies, and declared himself dictator. The Republic was now a battleground of generals, not laws. Sulla eventually stepped down, but the damage was done. A new precedent had been set. Political disputes could now be settled by force. Rome was no longer ruled by law, but by legions. The Republic staggered on, but its foundation had fractured. Out of the smoke of civil war rose three ambitious men: Pompey the Great, a celebrated general; Marcus Crassus, the richest man in Rome; and Julius Caesar, a rising star from an old but declining family. In 60 BCE, they formed the first triumvirate, secret alliance to control Roman politics. Together, they divided power. Pompey took Spain, Crassus took the East, and Caesar took Gaul. It was Caesar who would shine brightest. While conquering Gaul, he wrote vivid dispatches that made him a household name in Rome. His victories were brutal but effective. He brought glory, slaves, and riches back to Rome's doorstep. The Senate grew uneasy. Caesar was too popular, too successful, too independent. They ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome alone. Caesar had another plan, one that would end the Republic forever. On a cold January day in 49 BC, Caesar stood on the banks of the Rubicon River, the legal boundary beyond which no general could bring troops into Italy. He paused, then marched across with his legions. It was an open act of war. Alia iacta est, he declared. The die is cast. Pompey fled south, gathering forces. What followed was a brutal civil war that stretched across Italy, Greece, and Egypt. Caesar hunted down Pompey, who was eventually murdered in Egypt. Caesar, aligned with Cleopatra, helped secure her throne and returned to Rome a victor. But this was no ordinary victory. Caesar now controlled the Roman world. He was no longer a general, he was a ruler. The Senate had lost its power. The Republic had lost its meaning. Back in Rome, Caesar was appointed dictator, perpetuo dictator for life. He implemented sweeping reforms: debt relief, calendar reform, expansion of citizenship, and new colonies for veterans. But with every decree, the Senate's role shrank. Caesar stood above the law, above tradition, above the Republic. To many, Caesar was a saviorist-oring order to a chaotic world. To others, he was a tyrant. The line between reformer and despot blurred. Even his bodyguards were said to fear his ambition. Rumors swirled that Caesar would make himself king. Rome, born from a hatred of monarchy, could not tolerate that. A group of senators, the liberators, hatched a plan. They would save the Republic by killing the man who threatened it. March 15th, 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate, unarmed and unsuspecting. One by one, the conspirators surrounded him. The first knife struck his shoulder, then a second, a third. He staggered, confused. Among his attackers was Brutus, a man Caesar once trusted like a son. Et2, Brute. Caesar whispered his final breath, a mixture of betrayal and recognition. The senators fled, their hands stained in blood, believing they had restored the Republic. But they hadn't. Instead of saving Rome, they had unleashed chaos. Caesar's assassination did not restore liberty. It brought civil war. His allies, Mark Antony and Octavian, fought the assassins at Philippi. The Republic's last defenders fell. Octavian and Antony turned on each other, with Octavian emerging victorious. He became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Though he kept the facade of republican government, real power rested with him alone. The Senate, became ceremonial. Democracy became memory. The Republic, once Rome's heart, was gone. Rome didn't fall in a day. It fell over decades through corruption, inequality, militarization, and public fatigue. The people traded freedom for stability. They embraced a strong man who promised peace. The Republic died not just from Caesar's ambition, but from everyone's failure to protect its values. Today, as democracies around the world face growing threats, the story of Rome matters more than ever. It warns us that democratic systems don't always end in fire. Sometimes they end in silence and consent. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed one of history's most powerful cautionary tales. Julius Caesar didn't just change Rome, he changed the world. But the Republic was already dying. He simply delivered the final blow. Like this video if you believe history can teach us about the present. Subscribe for more long-form, uncensored deep dives into the rise and fall of empires, leaders, and ideas. And let us know in the comments, could what happened in Rome happen again? Stay informed, stay free.